Welcome back. This is K24 This Morning. We're looking at the big stories of the day. And of course, taking your views while at it, you can tweet us at K24TV. At Ezekiel, there shouldn't be such a task force in reference to the BBI's task force being extended. There should be people who are experts in constitutional law, economics, and other experts of about 7 great minds and EU and UK to be also available as friends of Kenya. In fact, the BBI report launch should be scrapped. Okay, that's his view. Godfrey Omo, our concern as the youth isn't representation in the task force, but looking at the bigger picture, we demand a powerful executive youth and at least 30% representation in the next BBI government. Okay, that's Godfrey's take on that particular issue. And then Moses Okoth putting a chart right there talking about character, competence, integrity, capability, and how these interlink. But the overall concern is that this is not applicable in government. It doesn't work right there. Keep those tweets coming in, of course, at K24TV. Right before we took the break, we were talking about the state of the country. Some people might say at times we just need to pray for the country. Then you go to what's happening in our churches and you ask yourselves a couple more questions. This is a story that you can find on the Daily Nation's page 12. Is it the truth or dare, as they say? Archbishop's followers would rather go for the latter. Miracle Babies pastor back with promises of healing the sick, taking away poverty, and killing those who bewitch his followers. We've seen what has happened in this particular case. He's been brought to the country because of his wrongdoings abroad, extradited back to Kenya, and yet he can still command quite the congregation. Is it a high time? And this is a question that has been asked very many times after we've seen what has happened with Pastor Nganga, we've seen what has happened with Kanyari. Should the government get more involved with the church so as to, because right now it's delinked, but should they dip their hands even more to make sure that by the time you start Nerima Ministries, you are thoroughly vetted by the state?
You know, when you ask should the government get more involved with the church, the funny thing about that story, there were actually politicians at that service and supporting DARE and all that. And our politics, they actually go and preach politics at churches. So they're intertwined to me. They are one in the same. So the way we're seeing our government behaving is the same way we're seeing our churches behaving. And that comes in the aspect of authority. But also religion is a little bit fuzzy because how do you tell people what to believe and how do you measure what you're believing is right or wrong? And so there's this sense of a kind of psychophancy that, again, we see in our politics that can be compared in our religion. So it would be difficult to say that the government should be more involved because the government at the moment is actually struggling to put itself in line and in check. So how is it going to put that in another institution? It's not going to be possible. So if I was to say that out, it's wishful thinking. Right. But I do think that our religious institutions go past morality. They're immoral. They're ethically immoral, where we've witnessed corruption, scandals, things that frankly should close down churches. There are particular individuals who should not be having churches or owning them, considering their past, whether they have even a conviction, doesn't even have to be in Kenya, it can be outside the country. That should be what the government should hold them accountable to. Right. Where if you do have a particular case and you are convicted, then that should bar you or limit you from being able to open the same kind of institution or church again. Right.
Some people are arguing that, John Paul, that when it comes to the church, they are really losing moral ground because even when it was issues of grand corruption or putting the government in check, some people are saying, when we look at what's happening in your church, you can't even speak as the church, and that's why they aren't as vocal. And then we see issues like this. How do you deal with that particular aspect?
I think this comes back to morality. Because if at all you are standing in the pulpit, I think you need to do what you're supposed to do, doing the right thing. Because most of our politicians, whenever something happens, the only sure way of maybe reaching out to their people is through the churches. That is why you'll find most of the politicians on Sunday, they'll want to stand in front of the people, maybe talk to them, toa sadaka kidogo. But here in Kenya, I think we've tried to separate, like we don't want to be involved on what our churches do. Today, when you go, you'll find today is a school, Monday to Saturday is a school, but on Sunday, the same school is turned to a church. I know in Rwanda they tried to regulate, I think the churches, they did that. I don't know how effective it has been, but I think for us, we are yet maybe to reach that point But to me, the question is about morality. Even when we talk about the Dare's case, the same people who are welcoming the politicians, some of these politicians are in the government.
Right.
The same government on Sundays, even with the executive, they're always in the same churches.
Right.
I'm not talking about the mainstream churches or any other churches. I don't want to maybe mention names, but I think the churches have to take their rightful place.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to legislate or regulate morality, so therein lies a conundrum. But let me come to a person who has quoted scripture several times on this show today. He might be in the best position to tell us how we move forward to save the institution that seems to be, imploding from within. No standards whatsoever. If I wake up today and decide I want to start Morte Ministries, I just need a room and a pay bill number.
And that
I
is
start.
very right.
Yes.
That is very, very right. To start with, government has no business interfering with people's faith. There should be a clear separation. But then we also need to understand this, that religion is actually politics by other means. So do not be surprised when you see politicians showing up. It's just the other side. It's the flip side of the coin. They are meeting their friends from the other side who are not, because who are not, these other guys will actually bring you because you are looking for something from on high. Then politicians show up because there is a congregation. There is nothing that brings the politicians closer, like a crowd. And the preachers are crowd pullers. So that is the tip of the spear of the polity as we have it. So let us really not be surprised too. I heard Nerima say that we should not expect, we should not allow people who have got questionable pasts to be preachers. If there is anything that makes Christianity, and let me speak for Christianity, I wouldn't know so much about other religions, is about having had a bad past and having transformed.
The whole soul
to Paul narrative is the strongest story that actually shows up in Christianity. So such like human guys who show up and say that he was bad and now he has transformed, people show up because you have seen God's touch. I know there's the logical end of explaining everything in the Bible, but every time you get to look at science, logic, and reason to explain those issues, then it looks like you're taking away God from the miracle, and the church is quite protective of that. So where do we go forward on this? Morality versus legality. What is moral sometimes is not necessarily what is illegal. Like, for example, Senator Murkomen and Senator Mutula Kilonzo representing Sonko is not illegal. It's just immoral. So, but then sometimes what is legal is not necessarily what is right. But then our politics is yet to get to a level where you can actually moralize people or bring up issues to do with morality on our people and tell them, okay, based on this, unless our politics and our decisions get moral, and that is not something you're going to write down, you're not going to legislate on that. It's going to take a bit of time. So unless we get to that particular level, it's going to take a bit of time before people are convicted out of what is moral, not necessarily what is illegal. That I can walk out of something because I feel I had a moral obligation to it. But in this country, if it is not written in black and white and it says something, you can actually get around it. So on there, I probably do not have so much. I saw him as a child growing up in Huruma. He would show up in Huruma and preach up. And then there was that scandal with, because I think the wife is still jailed. Did she come out?
Not yet.
Yeah, she's still in jail. But he's around here now winning souls. On that particular end, we might not really question that, because even Paul says that he really doesn't care why people are preaching elsewhere. Whatever motivation they are preaching really to him doesn't matter, so long as the gospel of Christ is perpetuated. That is a religious argument. But then from, these guys are role models to so many people who are coming up. That should be then the worry, that I can actually do anything I want and still get there. It is the same thing from nothing to something concept that works in our politics. That if I can show up with money and appear like I'm helping people, same way with this guy, if I can show up with some power that takes care of your problems, and if it's not possible, you can actually manufacture it, like we've seen it in other exposés in the past, then you count for something. Probably it's time we started looking at ourselves. Do we have a set of national ethos we ascribe to? On most of the time, I really do not agree with that ethos thing, because it's so hard to then bring people together. We are a country of about 100 tribes, strictly speaking. Because if you were to break down, the Kipsigis are not necessarily the Kalenjins, the Tugen. If you go to Luo Island, that is a country of 19 countries. It's a tribe of 19 nationalities. So you find we have got different sets of beliefs in there. And it takes about 50 years to build a culture.
Right.
Are we consistent on that? Vision 2030 was doing that, and then these new guys showed up, and then they binned it. So on there, probably we are going to have a lot of these problems going forward.
Right.
It's not new, by the way. It's been quite there for quite a while. So even as we look at him, probably it's for us who are coming up. And that's why I say, can we allow these younger people? So, if you're going to have the dares of this world, but then in the political sector, in the academia, crafting the next country for us, then we're also going to get there. I had an opportunity to speak to a former military officer whom I know since childhood. He's now a diplomat, and he's deployed on the secretariat for the BBI. And on the sides of that chat, he said, but even as you speak about issues to do with young people, I want to tell you something, that this struggle is not new. It has always been there over time. That while we were young, we still raise these issues, and people will still scatter us around. So he even as an older guy, agreed that this struggle has been there for quite a while. Whereas he is not of the opinion that it matters because we will get there and do the same. I think somehow we have to cut this thing. We should
break the cycle
Yeah,
somewhere.
we need to break the cycle so that we do not transfer trauma. Because if I looked at him, it's so traumatic, telling me that we used to have the same things. This struggle is not new. So for him, that trauma is what he's trying to move and normalize it on me as culture. It's traumatic of him.
Okay. I want us to move it along to what has trended for the better part of the weekend. King Kaka's music video, song Wajinga Nyinyi, caused a lot of debate online as well as it came out. Trended for quite a while. Went on to say that he had to pull it down and was coerced to do that. Might bring it back up later. Some people talking about the fact that probably that was a very elaborate and well-planned marketing stunt. Let's wait and see on that particular issue. Let me start with Nerima on this one, because very many youth are passionate about that particular song. But even when you examine the contents of the song, because I watched it and I was like, this is a very powerful piece.
Yeah.
But for me, I didn't feel like it was something that warranted any threat from any office. There's nothing that he said there that was really something that isn't in the public domain. We know how government functions. We've seen the scale of corruption. We've seen what we do ourselves in the leaders that we put. It's in the papers every day. What did you feel about the discussion that went on up until him having to pull the video off of YouTube?
Well, I think it was a powerful song. I think that it spoke a lot of truth, and a lot of people were applauding him for speaking truth, because they do think that King Kaka is in a position of influence. Of course he is. He influences a lot of young people. And it tells us about our freedom of speech, which in our constitution, it allows us to associate. We are allowed to speak freely. And so he shouldn't have put it down. I disagree with that fact. But I do see why we have this sense of fear. When we see entertainers who are normally just in the comedy sector or in a sector where you're not supposed to think about things, transitioning into thinking, it's a worry for the political elite because they do have an influence in the majority that votes. So we saw that happen in the US, where now we saw all these superstars and celebrities taking a political stand. And the fact that he has begun, I do hope that it begins with a wave of discussions with musicians actually doing something about it. About 2 days before, Eric Wainaina actually did a bit of a song where he was joking after Sonko's arrest. And we're seeing now musicians are now taking a stand of the political matters that are happening. What I was surprised about is the fact that the Kenya Film Classification Board, Ezekiel Mutua openly said that he has no issue with the video. That was the first person that I thought would openly do it. Perhaps I don't know who was threatening King Kaka. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes. But it's just to say that there are a lot of people who are in solidarity with him. I think that we should speak more openly. And I'm also one of those people who speaks openly. And young people need to see more young people speaking up. At the end of the day, that message just portrayed that he wants a better country. He wants something better for ourselves. And that's something every young person has sleepless nights about.
Right.
Because we're the ones who are building a future. When you're telling me about 10 years from now, what do I want to do? Frankly, a lot of young people are like me, I'm just trying to make it to tomorrow. I'm not even sure what I'm going to eat today.
Right.
And that's a very bleak future. And that's why I think even the video was black and white, just to show how bleak Kenya is appearing to be at the moment.
Right. And even as we looked at it, some people who are, taking shots at King Kaka for that particular music video, talking about that at this time, it's convenient for you to say that, but before, you used those very political leaders to, further your agenda in terms of music, putting them in your publicity. Also, Bahati was in there as well. And they said, you were there at his campaigns. Why are you talking about this as the message that should be put out there? Is it the people who put this particular government in, or this crop of leaders in, now feeling like they made a mistake and want to change their minds?
I think King Kaka's song was, to me, he was bold enough to do that. Talking about maybe other musicians like Bahati saying that they want to put this government, to me, there's nothing bad with that, because we all make mistakes, based on maybe the belief that you as a politician will come on board and say that in the next 2 or 3 years I'm going to do this. Maybe I'll be swayed with what you're telling me. So whether Bahati or any other musician maybe would have supported the current regime, they still have a right maybe to say, okay, I've reflected, I've seen maybe I made a mistake, I need to call out the ills that this government is doing. What King Kaka, the message was powerful, but what he's saying is not something out of the blues. We all know what is happening in the country. And even there are some people who are talking about revolution. I don't know if maybe the revolution will come from those quarters, because the revolution is not just, you don't just wake up and say you start a revolution. There needs to be a momentum. It has to be constant and consistent. So to me, these are people with influence. They're able to reach so many people outside there. And I think, to me, the musicians, if they feel the pinch that common mwananchi is undergoing that Wanjiko, because there's a part that says, my mom is Wanjiko, my father is a nobody, and this is the scenario. If you are a nobody, if you go to that office, maybe a government office, if you are a nobody, maybe you not get the services that you intend to have. So to me, I feel the message has to go out and maybe spread. These people have to come on board. The problem with Kenyans, we forget so fast. Right. And in the next 2-3 weeks, this one will have maybe faded away, and everything will go the comfort zone. So the momentum has to be there. The youth have to rise up. They feel the pinch. The issue about the youth supporting Sonko, I'm not saying Sonko is bad, but for them coming in defense of Sonko.
What are you saying?
Because the matter is, we need to understand that, because the matter is in court. We need to know if it is true, he sold all this million. But what I'm saying is the youth, being the backbone of this country, they need to get their rightful place, and they need to make their stand known. Then if they are the ones to bring out the revolution, then they have to come on board and say, okay, this is the way that we're going to chat, we're going to move forward on this direction. Yes.
Arnold, for a man with many insights as far as how the executive works and the state machinery as well, do you feel that pressure could have been put on King Kaka to get that video off of the internet, and if so, why? Nothing new in the video. I mean, all that he said there was all the things that we know, but we just don't talk about like that. But there was nothing earth-shattering, groundbreaking.
And that is where we have to actually start. I am actually surprised that we were surprised as a nation of what he said. And I'm actually very angry that we were angry at what he said, because we thought, as in, it just goes to show how apathetic we have been to politics. That, and especially for young people, showing up and looking like we are very surprised and we are angry at how things are being run in this country, when these are the things we say every day. But it only trended because it was spoken word. Literally, it wasn't even researched, because there are a few other things that have got gaps that would want to be worked on. He didn't do proper research. There was nothing new, no groundbreaking, totally nothing. Just a bit of creativity to what we always say in our public spaces, not even private spaces. We don't whisper those things. We speak to those issues in our WhatsApp groups. We speak to them in our family gatherings. We joke about them on social media. So King Kaka just said what we have always said. But that we came out and looked like we are surprised is one of those things that really should worry all of us. That we actually have gotten to a level where we have got a very thick skin, we don't know this, that it takes somebody to remind us of what we know. Either we have grown so insensitive, or I don't know what to call it, but then when medicine no longer works, what do we call that?
Like
When you're resistant
Yeah.
to
Yes, we are so resistant to truth and such. And I think that should worry us. But then what I saw online is what I call a national dishonesty conference. That all of a sudden we were surprised, all of a sudden we were angry. Yet everything that is happening in this country is the work of our hands. We vote for these people, we defend them, we bring them back. You know, when he says that he's not saying Sonko is a bad person or is a good person. No, Sonko as a human being is definitely good as a human being. But being a good human being does not necessarily make you a good leader. There should be that distinction, so that we are not mixing you, the person, plus the leader you should be. There should be a distinction that there is Uhuru Kenyatta, the president, and we do not expect to know Uhuru Kenyatta, as in at that particular time it changes. We expect to see you in the office you swore. So what we were having for the last 2 days, I want to call it a national dishonesty conference. We know these things, yet we are here competing to lie to each other and lying to ourselves. It's a dishonesty, a very dishonest conversation we've been having. We are not a honest people. To ourselves, we're not talking about to other people. So the conversation you see online is just an online conference, but I call it a national dishonesty conversation, or rather conference that is happening online. We're not being real. But then on him being threatened to pull down or not, we expected that automatically. Though I would want to see any of those people mentioned in there show up and say that this particular person mentioned here is me. He only used one name for each of those guys mentioned there, even if he linked it to something else. But then we would want to know if, for example, there is our IT to somewhere else, just to give an example, who has got daughters. Then you show up and say that I am the one he mentioned.
Right.
He didn't necessarily say you are the one. So it's one of those things when you show up, but then of course he's going to get threats, and it has always worked. Intimidation to violence in itself, that's why we even legislate around it. If you read news about your assassination, it works to intimidate you. So I think that has worked a bit of it. It helps move this thing up there, but I would want to challenge him. This one is a bold one. Can he now stop singing and come and become a Bobby Wine here?
Right.
Yeah, so that we consolidate this field of people who are trying to, for public good, who are trying to fight, the Nerimas of this world. It's quite thin. Can we have more people like him showing up so that they do not hide behind the cloak of creativity and those other things? The country is in need of fighters, not just speakers. So he has done well. He has pricked the conscience. But knowing too well that our conscience is not so long pricked, we will have forgotten and we are waiting for the next trending thing, is that he needs to come up and sustain that song. When we talk about sustaining that song, is that we need to regurgitate that continuously until as a people we wake up. Finally, I want to say this, that we are on a precipice. Generation Y should be handing it to Generation X. There is a generational handover that should be happening. The firstborn of that particular bit are the Murkomens of this world. At 39, he should probably be referred to a Generation X. So there is a generational handover from Y to X, because Generation Z is already becoming mature.
Right.
The first batch of them became 18 this particular year. So our people born in their 80s, all of them, should be preparing to take over. That's why you actually see a lot of, before Generation Z is actually a critical mass that needs to hand over. That particular bit, we want all of them, the King Kakas of this world. Who is the other guy from?
Bahati and everyone.
No,
Juliani.
no Bahati.
Juliani, Wainaina, Eric.
Wainaina, all those guys, they actually need to join the army that then delivers the Third Republic. Because now the second liberation of our country, the post-liberation, or rather the post-independent liberation of the country is nigh. But the people who are supposed to take care of it are coy, moving around, singing, then leaving for Nerimas and a few others to speak out, and then we ignore them. He needs to leave that comfort end. He's a good guy, he's cool, he says it as it is. He needs now to move from that space and come and lend his help and power, because he has got influence.
So he
and
needs
he
now to
feels
move it forward to the next level.
Yes, he
Okay.
should sustain it.
Okay, fine. And that's where we're going to leave it as far as our newspaper review is concerned this morning. Thank you so much, Arnold Maliba, and for that challenge that you have thrown forth. I hope King Kaka follows up on that. Thank you so much for your time this morning. John Paul, asante sana for making time this morning as well. Nerima Wako, as always, thank you so much for that. As always, the conversation continues online as well. What's your views on the debate that have gone on so far? You can tweet us at K24TV. Alternatively, SMS us on 21222. We take a short break. We are back on the other side. We'll definitely be discussing more on this particular issue and plenty other stories that have been trending online. Interactive comes up next.